Hello everyone and welcome back to the Founder Files. Today I've got the CEO and co-founder of Supernova Brands, Jan Parmentier. Now, if you haven't heard of Supernova Brands, I won't be surprised because I hadn't either. And that's not throwing shade on their business or saying that I know loads of companies out in the world. It's just they operate a very unique space on the value chain of retail and importing products. And that's because they're a value-added distributor where they are the suppliers of some of the world's biggest brands like Disney and Starlink, for example. And their customers are all the biggest retailers in South Africa. They've got over 1,500 products that they sell at any point in time, and they're expanding into 6 Southern African countries right now. So they are really going through the scaling journey, and they've been around for a decade. So Supernova Brands is a company that's really making waves in this space, and they've got a significant amount of market share, but really one of those ones, unless you are a customer or supplier of them, might not know about them. So this is also a conversation where we go a lot deeper rather than broader, which I love sometimes. So we go into the depth of really understanding his business, understanding this industry in terms of how does the retail space operate, how does the supplier space operate, all the differences and complications within a business like this, and the complexity of operating in the import-export space, how they've had to pivot over time. And part of that is that because it can be so complex and because you have so many different products, how do you shape your identity as a company? And that's a topic that we go into in depth as well around the identity that they had, the rebrand that they went onto, and the necessity of that and what that was able to unlock specifically on the supplier side. And then the other main topic that we get into is the journey of his co-founder choosing to leave and sell his shares, and why they ended up getting a private equity investor as the new 50-50 partner to Jan, what they were able to do in the process, what they were able to unlock for the business after that transaction happened, and just kind of what Jan has learned on that journey, what he would have done differently and what he wants other founders to know. So that's a real deep dive into what it's like to transition out a co-founder, bring in an investor, and what he looked for, and maybe what you might be looking for as well. So if there's nuggets like this that you're looking for in a podcast like the Founder Files, and you want to get that in terms of accessing all of these insights, well, we've got this insight vault available to you that is going to be open to the public in time. But right now, if you want exclusive access, help us shape the next season of the Founder Files to make sure that we are always improving the content, the topics that we're giving you, and making sure that you're getting the most value as possible. So if you want to help us out with that and contribute to this podcast, please fill out the survey in the link in the description of the podcast below and help us shape the next season of the Founder Files. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado from me, Jan Parmentier. Welcome to the Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Jan, welcome to the Founder Files. After meeting you at an event recently, I think the interest that we had in each other and each other's businesses and what we can talk about today really was clear. So thank you for joining me. And yeah, this is going to be great to get into. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. It's an honor to be invited to the Founder Files. It really is.
Well, it's my pleasure. I mean, it's an honor to have you here. I think you've built a really amazing brand. You've even gone through a rebrand in the past couple of years. And for a lot of people that probably won't know Supernova Brands, is it's also where you sit. I mean, you've got some of the biggest retailers as your clients, right? You're a supplier to many of them. And the right people in your industry will know about you. But a lot of people in the public probably won't know about you. So I think just to start that off, talk to me about Supernova Brands, what it used to be called, and what your business really is.
Yeah. So we in technical terms, we are value-added distributor. What that means is that actually you, one, a distributor, and two, you the value add part too. The distributor part is fairly straightforward and simple. You're basically moving boxes from your warehouse or the warehouses into the retailers. So you find stores or shops for the brands that you distribute and you sell them to the retailers. So that's kind of, and obviously the second part of it is the financing part to it. So obviously it is you outlaying a lot of money for quite a while. So it's kind of like the finance banking part to it where you play a role. That's in the old school way to call that a box mover. So that's that role that you fulfill. We have value added distributor, meaning that you're the face, you're the feet on the ground for a brand. So for example, when we are approaching overseas brands, if they want to be distributed by us in South Africa, we really are their hand and feet on the ground. So we the brand, we run the social media, we run the marketing campaigns, we do the merchandising, we run all the kind of influencer campaigns. So we basically do the whole activity. If the brand would be themselves in South Africa, we basically do that whole array of services for a brand. And that's roughly the definition of a value-added service distributor. We distribute brands. So, for example, like Dreamy or Extremely, those are overseas brands. We distribute them. But we also have, other division, we actually also private label. So private label, and we have our in-house brands. So, but it basically means a retailer comes to us and says, hey, we're actually interested in this range or use a lookbook. Can you please source and procure these kind of products for us or build us a range? There's a lot of back and forth, but once we actually establish these are the products we settled on, then we actually private label that for the retailer. So we either put it under their in-house brand, or we sometimes just put it in one of our brands that we own ourselves. And those are the kind of two parts of the business that we've got.
Okay, so I just want to unpack that in terms of like showing an example. So because when you're saying value, I've got a whole bunch of questions here. Because when you say value-added distributor, I'm obviously trying to figure out like who's the customer. Because the way that even the term exists is as if the supplier is the main person that you're serving. But where does the money flow from? I mean, are they the ones paying you to distribute? I mean, do you get paid by the retailer that you sell to? Do you get paid by the customer that ends up buying the product? Is it on consignment? I'd say, how does that work? Then we'll go into like, how does the business model work? Then we'll go into examples of actually picturing where you sit in this supply chain.
No, good question. I mean, we always say we're the middle of the lemon. So if you slice a lemon in the middle, we're on both sides. So on the one side, you've got the brand, and the brand has a lot of requirements, and the brand obviously, so now you're famous European brands, you've got a lot of things that you want to achieve out of us. So that's a long negotiation with the one side of the lemon on pricing, on logistics, where do you pick up the stock, what are the payment terms that we've got. So we buy stock from a brand. They sometimes give us payment terms, sometimes they don't give payment terms. I mean, so I'll get into the examples actually,
Okay,
but it's like it's a hair care brand as an example, or personal care brands, and that's actually the one part. So then we buy the stock, we take the risk, we do the stock buying, and we fully have the risk on that stock investment that we've made. The other side of the lemon is actually the retailer. So we supply Builders Warehouse, the Foschini Group, Takealot, Superbalist, etc., etc. So all the mainstream retailers in South Africa, and we sell them the product and the kind of risk investment that we took on the stock. We sell that onto the retailers. Now, obviously, the ideal scenario is it's not us going to...
you buy the stock from the supplier, from the brand. Yeah. So like they make their money, they're happy. But the value added part is about the fact that like, cool that you're buying my products, but I want you to take care of our brands. Like exactly. Do that as well. Okay.
Because I mean, that's the whole thing. Like when we go to a retailer, we want the retailer to already know about the brands. So sometimes you can put a very new product and pitch it to a retailer, but the majority of the times you actually want the retailer to come to you. That's the best position to be in. The retailer has seen the brand, the retailer has seen the brand building exercise you've done already, and they are now saying we want that product in our stores. So that's the ideal scenario. From a money flow point of view, we pay the supplier. Let's start January. We launch a brand. In January, we buy the stock. We pay the supplier. Then you got a month manufacturing, you've got a 1 or 2 month sea freights. So you've got 3 months that you've outlaid your money already. Then you've got your stock sitting in your warehouse for 1 to 3 months maximum that you want it to be sitting in your warehouse. So you've outlaid your money for 6 months already. In the meantime, you sell it to the retailer. The retailer pays you between 30 and 90 days. So you've outlaid your money for another 3 months on top of it. So quite often you actually finance or outlay your cash for 6 to 9 months. That's kind of what they often say. We also a financial service because we are basically bridging that payment gap for 9 months, and that's kind of service that a unfortunately falls on us. Obviously, you try to shorten that as short as possible. So you try to get the ultimate payment terms from the brand, and you try to get as short the minimal payment terms from your retailer to make that flow as short as possible. But that's quite a big part of your business. We got a very cash and capital intensive business. There is no other way around it. We've got a big warehouse with a lot of stock in it. The retailers expect from you to actually have stock on hand. They have automated replenish systems that run. And if you actually run out of stock, you're at risk of being financially penalized. Because basically the retailer kept shelf space for you. You're not able to fill that shelf space. So there's a loss of revenue for the retailer. So sometimes they can actually financially punish you for it.
So I also want to understand now, I love the points of the two different sides to lemon, because even there, like there's different segments I can picture in terms of like the brands, like also what you mentioned with, I think it was the white labeling, is in terms of the, like you'll put your own brand on it and it doesn't really necessarily, like, so who you pick as suppliers is also very strategic. Who you pick as retailers is very strategic. So I think like this, I really want to get into and understand. But what I want to know is, why not you, like in this e-commerce world that we live in, why don't you go direct to customer? Surely it would be more profitable. Obviously there would be more complexities involved. Why do you sell to the retailer? That would be harder to negotiate with, just lower profitability. Even you said there is like the way that you're holding stock for so long and for the amount of cash required. Why go to the retailer and not go direct to customer? As if it's that easy of a decision, but I want to understand
I mean, fair point. Like, so maybe I should actually explain the core foundation of our business. So our business exists out of two divisions. We run them as kind of like, obviously you're in the same building, but we run them as two separate companies nearly. We've got a consumer electronics division and we've got a homeware division. Our consumer electronics division has three verticals: tech health, appliances, and smart home and gaming. So those are the three verticals in consumer electronics. They are selling consumer electronics that are extremely innovative, new. They're not cheap either. So in our company, we've got something what we call the 6 S's. They stand for success, but it's quite straightforward. But a product must be sexy, must be shippable, must be straightforward, must be sustainable, must be smart. So we've got a couple of these 6 S's that a product must fit. What it also means is that quite often the product has a lot of somehow innovation to it, and it doesn't make it necessarily a very cheap product. That's why we actually started the other division too, which is the homeware division, which is, we've got a Disney, for example. So we do Disney bedding and pillows and towels, and we do homeware items for any household. So we always say the products that we procure are most of the time for within the 4 walls of a house. That's where we play in. The consumer electronics are the consumer electronics for in your house. The home division are the products for in the bedrooms and your living room, etc. The difference though is the consumer electronics, they're actually, most of the time, the products we've got there, they cater for the higher LSMs of our market. So the 65 million in South Africa, there's probably only 10 million South Africans who can actually afford the products that we're selling in our consumer electronics division. Those are the customers quite often that are also shopping online. I mean, it depends on the category where you're playing, but e-commerce has an adoption rate of 5%, sometimes on the category 10% if you're lucky. But it doesn't capture the full market yet. Like, a lot of customers are still buying in store. There is no other way around it. And yes, the customers that are buying some of our smart home and gaming, for example, I mean, we focus on AR and PR. It's a very tech savvy customer that are going to buy online. The problem is that we often had is like, oh, it's not a problem, but I mean, if you want to scale this business, often you can also reason like, it's a pity that we only service 10% of the South Africans. Like, we should be servicing a much bigger part of the population. And that's why we've got the home division. The price tickets or the item price is quite a bit lower. We've got products from $100 to 500 Rand. So we can actually cater for a much bigger part of the South African customer base. E-commerce wise, quite often, those are the kind of products that you're not always particularly going to buy on the e-commerce. You're often going to buy it in a Builders, a Leroy Merlin, like these kind of retailers where it impulse buys. You walk into a store, you see it, you didn't realize you needed it, and you end up going home with like a turnaround item. And that's kind of why we put the two divisions, to make sure that we capture the biggest part of the South African market. And e-commerce is a big part of it, without a doubt. I'm Belgian, and when I came here, I came with the clear intention of I want to do something in e-commerce. But the reality is like e-commerce is growing extremely fast, but offline retail is still 90% of the retail GDP. So there is no other way around it. The first 5 years, we had a heavy focus on e-commerce. But since we actually opened the doors and we went into the offline, it drastically scaled the business too.
Okay, no, that makes sense. But I think the biggest thing that's stuck out for me is that a lot of the products that you buy and obviously sell is like niche wants rather than needs. So even on the technology side, is like you're dealing with on the adoption curve, the innovators, the early adopters, and even if I'm thinking like a corporate buyer, like some of these big retailers, like they're not going to go on risk, lower volume. But it's also an important category that they need to have, because it's like you can't be an incredible connection if you aren't providing, like the basis of electronics. Where else are people going to go? I think that's also the part of it, is like if you want to maintain your stake and share of the market in the space, you need to be able to provide products across the range. But the thing is, as a buyer, I'm dealing with these brands that we're going to sell thousands, if not tens of thousands of units of. And the point that it's strategically important for me to have these products as well, but I'm not going to sell as many of those. So the effort for me to go down the procurement process and figuring out who are the suppliers, how do we need to do that, and like the attention that they want on their brand, because it's such an innovative like product as well, means that this is too much effort for a buyer to simply just handle. Is that the need and the gap that you're fulfilling on the retailer side?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because retail landscape globally, so just South Africa, is extremely competitive. There is no other way around it. Like the industry is particularly competitive. There's a lot of customers and service providers who are playing in a similar space. And if you enter into a very commoditized part of the market, you're going to play on price. There's no other way around it. Like if you work on kettles, as an example, everyone needs a kettle in the house. If you go for the mass volume segment, you're going to be competing with hundreds of kettle suppliers, and it's going to become a very commoditized price discussion. Whereas the retailer, they want to be different. Of course, you're going to sell the kettles and you're going to sell thousands and tens of thousands, but the retailer also wants to be different. They want to be innovative, different as their competitor. So they're looking for that form of like innovation, like what's the next big thing? And I think that's the nice part where we play in. Could you say, is it financially the most wise to do? No, because quite often we've got brands and products that we don't sell extremely high volumes of, but it is what makes you stand out. Like it really is. The buyer is going to recognize you for, Supernova Brands are the guys that are going to, like, if they're looking for their next big thing, they're gonna come to us and they're gonna ask us, well, like, what's new, what's next, and slowly, like, you can't just come in as a new supplier and expect that an Incredible Connections or a ShopRite is gonna buy 100,000 kettles from you. Like, it's not gonna happen. They've got already so many service providers. So you kind of got to carve your way in. And maybe at one point you're going to do a deal on the kettles, but you never want to give up that innovation, because if you just kettles, you're going to be price driven down. And I don't think it's going to be the success of your business in the end.
So where these questions are coming from is I actually used to work at TFG. So I'm thinking of they're literally the buyers and planners. And who is your actual like customer as a person? Like whose job is it to that you're engaging with predominantly on their side? I'm assuming it's going to be someone more at an executive level, like there's sign off and like procurement process that needs to happen. But once that's engaged with, who are the people that come to you and they're like, oh, your team, like Supernova Brands, what's new we're planning for the new season. we need something cool. What have you got?
Yeah, we mostly deal with the buyers and the planners. They ultimately are decision makers for it. So a buyer, they work often in seasons, depending if it's electronics or homeware. Their buying patterns are a lot different actually. But most of the time they actually come to you and say, okay, for this next 6 months, this is what we're looking for. And that's when you kind of work your pitches and what you've got in the pipeline of new products. The planner is the one who has the grip on the wallet. So the buyer is the dreamer. The buyer is going to be like, I want this futuristic thing and that and that and that. They're going to dream. And eventually the planner is the one to wake up the buyers like, well, listen, we don't have the money for that. We can only do X, Y, Z. So it kind of the black and white kind of personality type or the left and the right brain that are going to have lots of discussions. Eventually it's the merchandise exec who's going to sign off on it together with the buyer. But that's kind of the normal process we go through. But you want that buyer to think of Supernova Brands when they come out of a strat meeting and it's been told in this part of electronics, we need innovation. For example, personal care. At home, says personal care is our new kind of way forward where we want to expand in. You want that buyer to think of Supernova Brands as in, I think I'm going to phone up these guys first because I'm sure they've got something up their sleeve when it comes to new range or innovation. And that's kind of the place you want to be at.
I think that's also very interesting because, I mean, there's two pitches you got to build into one. It's like on the one side, it's like this is why this is super sexy and innovative and like I'm going to speak to your heart. But then also it's like, well, here's the financial model as well. And this is also why it's going to be profitable and how the data is showing the demand for these products and how it's shifting in this market. And they're like, okay, cool. Thanks. You've satisfied both people here.
Definitely.
But I guess
the one thing I would want to mention on it is risk. Because unfortunately, there's a thing called sale or return, meaning that if the retailer doesn't see the right sell-through after a couple of months, it actually quite often becomes your risk again, your problem. The retailer is going to say, it didn't sell, it's taking up shelf space, you're going to need to take that stock back. So you can dream, but you also have to be extremely realistic. And if you just try to make the sale to a retail buyer, you are going to get your fingers burned. Like you have to, if the buyer says, for example, let's do 10,000 units of this SKU, and you think like that's unrealistic, I think it's only going to be 1,000. Rather stick to your gut feeling and supply 1,000 units and come up with a solution instead of wanting just to make the sale. Because if that stock ends up back in your warehouse, that stock is burnt, it's sometimes damaged, it's dirty. Like that's the situation you really don't want to be in.
Mm. I think also it's just reinforcing what you do is really complex because you need to understand the consumer market, you need to understand the retailers, you need to understand the suppliers, you need to know what's going on in kind of global supply chain right now and what's happening in innovation in these spaces. So there's a lot that you need to keep your eye on because like at the retailer side, that's what they're coming to you for. It's like what's happening in the world, tell me what's exciting. Even though this is my job, I know that you are better at being niche than this. So like it's really, it's a very niche specialization because I want to go full circle back to the first question that I asked is why not go direct to consumer? It's just because there's such a niche specialization here, which means that like if you went direct to retailer, you're not competing with your customers, right? In terms of who you're competing with, there's so few people that play in that space just because of the capabilities you need to run a business like yours.
No, that's exactly it. Likewise, like the retailer really has done the hard work of actually getting to the end consumer. They've got big databases, they've got a loyal customer following. It is great indeed for us to capture D2C and try capture a part of that market. But for us, ultimately, we really don't care where the sale happens. Like, yes, if a customer buys on our website, great, we made some more margin. But to be honest, the cost of acquisition on your own website is actually quite expensive too. So eventually your net margin is ultimately roughly going to be the same. And as long as the customer ends up with our product in their hands, we are satisfied.
Yeah, so that's also now speaking to the supplier side. So, I mean, let's even look at Disney for a sec, right? Like how did you manage to get one of the world's biggest brands full stop as someone that's willing to trust you in South Africa as well. I think that's a yeah. Tell me about that journey. How did you manage to get suppliers like that?
Yeah, it's quite a complicated one, because the Disney conversation is basically there's two ways. Either there's always a minimum guarantee. So what Disney wants is they want to make sure that there's a minimum amount paid to Disney, regardless of the volume you've sold. So, and that's a minimum guarantee you have to commit to, because that's the financial amount that will go to Disney. Now, if you manufacture and you've produced 10,000 units betting with Disney on it, as an example, you put that into retail. If the sell-through, however, is way below what you expected, you still have to pay that minimum guarantee to Disney. So you're taking actually quite a like you, again, it's exactly the same case with the retail example. You first have to be extremely certain that you've got a viable business case. And that's kind of like the risk is often put onto the supplier side, where you got to be certain you've got a good product at the right price, where the South African customer is wanting to have that product at that price before you actually make an investment. And sometimes there's other ways around it. Sometimes the retailer has a Disney license, so you can work together. The retail is actually paying for that license, and you just manufacture on their license. Or you can actually have a supplier who's overseas and he already pays for an African license. So then you just circumvene it. You work together with the European supplier, as an example, and then you supply that straight into the South African market. So there's a couple of ways around it, but eventually it often comes down to risk assessment and are you believing that this is the right product at the right price?
So you also threw the word manufacturing in there, which is something I didn't necessarily expect. I mean, like in this Disney example, are you essentially going, I think the product's going to win this market. I need to get this manufactured, but I need to pay for the licensing from Disney to do so. So you also go not just to them to pay for the licensing fees, but you go to a manufacturer with the product spec as well. And I want you to build X many units of this and I'm going to sell it.
Correct. Yeah,
Sure.
That's it.
Wow. Okay. So I mean, I'm the more I'm sort of speaking about this, the more amazed I am at how complex this is, because there's just so, on the one side, you're getting pre-manufactured products, right, with their own brand, because especially if it's going to be innovative, that needs to be sold. And then you're going to be just showing what these new exciting things out in the world are, and you're educating retailers on that. On the other side is you're looking at the market and you're thinking, what are some really good products that are going to be able to sell here in terms of, and Disney's a good example, is like, especially if there's been recent movie that's come out, right? And I can imagine Deadpool and Wolverine was because I mean they own Marvel, right? So there'll definitely be an increased demand here. But what's good? But the products that are going to sell here versus the products that's going to sell in France are going to be very, very different. I mean, there'll be overlap, but even then, it's like that's not necessarily some situation where you're going and getting the product directly from the supplier that is Disney. It's actually got to do with the fact that it's like this product doesn't necessarily exist, or it doesn't exist in South Africa, and I need this to get manufactured. I need the approval, the licensing, the right manufacturer to do so. So you get into a product role as well, not just a distributor role. So that's also a very different space that you're playing in there as well.
Yeah, and that's also why our teams have a different setup. So the teams in a consumer electronics division, they actually work as vendor managers, and the vendor manager is the brand manager. I mean, we call it vendor manager, but it's basically a brand manager, and they own that brand from A to Z. So underneath the vendor manager is a key account manager with a team. So they live and breathe that brand. The part is the brand has done the legwork on the product, on the packaging, the product fit. If it actually is a viable product in the market, the warranties, the brand tackles that. In our home division, we actually work with category managers, and the category managers are in charge from A to Z on a product most of the time. They get a lookbook from a retailer, they have their own inspiration, they put that into kind of like a Pinterest board on like, this is the vision that we've got for that range for a brand. But they are the ones in going to factories, they do the sourcing part. So they literally do that part from A to Z. Now, ultimately, you always try to figure out like, what is the deciding factor why a customer is going to buy this product? So if if you take a towel as an example, like there's so many towels in the market. It's commoditized. This ranges from 59 Rand to over 1,000 Rand. It's a huge range. So you always try to think of like, what is going to make this product more special, so that if a product sees this product in store, a customer sees this product in store, what is going to convince that customer? And that's obviously often why you, for example, are like, well, actually, we can do this with a new Disney movie as an example, because that's actually going to convince that customer, that's something that I require or want. But on the consumer electronics, the demand often is there already because it's a well-known brand. Like we sell Starlink, we do Dreamix, Jimmy, Google. So like the kind of legwork of getting or creating demand is not always, but sometimes there is an awareness already. Whereas with towels, there is zero awareness. There's no reason, the customer doesn't know why this is a better towel as your competitor. A Disney, for example, is obviously like it's now suddenly a deciding factor for a customer. That's why I want this towel. So to be honest, when we started the business, initially we thought like this is a buying and selling business. You buy a product and you sell it. But in my head, I sometimes oversimplify it still. Like this is just a buying and selling business. It's a trading business. By no means. There are so many levels of kind of complication that it's added to it, that it actually gets quite complicated.
So on that note, is like, this isn't just straightforward buying and selling, like you say. There's levels of complexity to this. Like on the one side, you're dealing, you are the face of the brand. On the other side, you're the category manager, and there's a completely different strategic focus there. And even within that, there's just so many variables, and there's so many things that need to change. My main question now is how did you even scale this in the first place when it's this complex? And I think it's also taken me a while to ask this question, but give me a sense of the scale that you're at right now. And then I really want to work backwards to know how you manage to scale such a complex business.
Where we are now, let me start there and work it backwards. So we supply, and again, like I say this with in the most humble way, because it's been a long and hard journey. So we've been in business for 10 years now. I am proud of where we're at now, but we still have a long way to go to where we want to be. And so by no means we're the biggest in the market. By no means we're the best. Like I don't want to make any of those claims. Because I know where I want to go. Like I know where we need to be in 5 years' time. But where we are now, and I think sometimes you should celebrate your wins too, which I think we're always too hard on ourselves in not celebrating them, because you're only looking forward. But we are dealing with some very premium consumer electronic brands. I think that's a major win, because there's two big parts to it. Like one, dealing with the biggest customers in South Africa, which are your biggest retailers, the Foschini Group, the Walmart, the Massmart Group, the Takeoff Group, all these big groups. If you knock on their door with one product, it's a kind of like low likelihood that they will actually open the door for you. So before a retailer trusts you, there must be some trustworthiness, and they must actually believe in you, that you're not a fly by night. Like opening the accounts, the rebranding sessions, it takes time for a retailer to allocate that resource to a new supplier. It really takes a lot of time for onboarding. So a retailer wants to know these guys are not a fly by night. We've had retailers where it took us 6 to 7 years before actually the retailer was like, okay, you're still around, still doing a good job. We trust you in this process going forward, because a retailer is hedging their bets on you. If you don't deliver, if there's issues with you, they are themselves going to get in trouble. For example, festive season right now, if we don't deliver the stock that we said we're going to be delivering, for whatever reason, we are putting the retail at risk. So I think that's achievement one. It really is a long process in order to be trusted by the big retail chains. And then the other part is actually the brands. Consumer electronics, we deal with some very premium, exclusive consumer electronics brands, like a Starlink, like a Genie, like an Extreme, like a Google. Like it takes a lot of convincing. So my job is always dual. Like one, I need to be the face with the retailer and make sure that they have trust and believe in us. But my other part is actually mostly overseas, where we're going to put a name in a market that when a brand thinks of, I want to go into South Africa, that they actually think of Supernova Brands. And those are the two big parts of our business in order to get it to the scale where it is right now. Often it's a bit of a big wheel that you need to get going. And if one big brand trusts you, quite often there's another big brand that will be like, oh, but that brand is with Supernova Brands. They must be doing a good job. So then that wheel starts to spin. But it's all about getting that wheel to spin. We started the business 10 years ago. Did we ever think we were going to be a value-added distributor? By no means. By no means. Good and a bad thing. I think the good thing is that you're probably more naive and you're just finding your way. And it kind of organically happens and you kind of like hustle your way through. Bad thing is that I think if you probably know your identity from day one, you probably would get there faster. In the 10 years, I think we've done a lot of things. We've also had other businesses. So actually, I'll get to the starting point on how we. So that's obviously where we are now. If you go to the starting point,
actually, I want to go one level deeper into that because I think I love the humility, but I'm going to call you out for it as well because what you explained to me now is your competitive advantage that took a huge amount of time to develop, specifically in terms of your brand equity and trust on both sides, which allows you to be able to do what you do now. And now that's also why I imagine it feels like there's still so much ahead of you because it's taken years to get some of these amazing suppliers and brands and the amazing retailers on. So now that we've got them, it's like, cool, how do we now develop and grow from here? So I can 100% get that. But I guess like how many retailers, how many stores? I mean, you've got the biggest brands like you've said. How many SKUs do you sell per month, even if that's a valid metric? I'm just give me I want to get a sense of how much stuff comes through your business.
Yeah, I think retailers, a big achievement is that we basically supply nearly every single big retail chain in South Africa. So I think there's one or two missing, but that's probably because we don't have the right product for it or for that particular retailer. So I think that's achievement one. Like you supplying the mainstream retailers, a big brand, that's what they want to know, that you have access to the full market. So that's part one. Part two is that we've got quite a lot of SKUs in our consumer electronics division. You obviously have a little bit less SKUs because there's so many headphones and like there's not such a wide variety. We probably have around 450 SKUs in the consumer electronics. In the home division, we've got a lot. We've got close to 1,000 SKUs. And that's a lot to manage. But you could,
those change. Those probably change every year, maybe every quarter, every season. It's just like that's a constantly moving number.
Yeah, continuously. So it is hard to manage. Like you're basically looking at 1,500 SKUs. Is that a good indication of how big you are? Not always, because there could easily be a business with 10,000 SKUs that only sells 10 units of that SKU per month. Then you're still not at the scale you want to be. So it really is a fine-tuning of what is the right amount of SKUs that you can maximize and drive volume through. Because the more SKUs you're going to have, the harder it's going to... Exactly. Like this, and that's really, in the beginning, you're like product. Like I want more products, let's push more into the market. But if you actually don't maximize that one SKU, what's the point you're really moving on to a new product? So I always refer to SKU. The SKU is like basically a product. So that's kind of the term how we call it. But if you got one product and you're not even maximizing it, like what's the point of moving on to your next product already? Because you're not selling the right volume. So the SKUs is not always the right indication in your business. I know businesses with 200 SKUs and they're doing tremendous volume, tremendous. So I even know a business, in fact, actually with 5 SKUs, that is probably doing half of our turnover, and we've got 1,000 SKUs. So it really depends on like what other products in the SKUs you've got. But yeah, that's kind of the scale and the scope of the business.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's, you might brought up the term identity, and this is also, it depends on like what kind of business that you want to be, because what what your product range is, how you're different to any other kind of distributor, why you go to certain suppliers, and I think it's also the needs of the market. If you're in retail, is about the fact that it's like you need both. You need the breadth and the volume if you want to service that market. If you want to serve enterprise clients, that they're not going to just buy 10 SKUs from you, right? They're not going to just buy 10 units of one SKU from you. They're looking at, like, I'm assuming thousands minimum. It depends on how niche the product is. What's like actually? I maybe ask that question. What's like the minimum order volume you'll usually get?
We go quite low. Sometimes it's boxes are in inner and outer packs. Sometimes the quantity is an inner or an outer pack. So meaning it could be sometimes 24 units is the MOQ. Because again, it's similar there. Like, we rather don't want the retailer to overstock themselves and then actually have bad numbers for you. You rather want to actually start slow.
So you'll pilot.
And exactly. And so that's why, like, sometimes the amount of doors is not a great indication on a product, because you could be because in total, I think we service about 1,500 doors. So that means it's a retailer, for example, has 100 doors, meaning that the 100 shops. You can put a product straight away into 100 doors, but if there's no sell-through, you're actually going to burn your brands. Like, you rather put it in 10 stores, do it extremely well, merchandise it, promotion it, activations, do it extremely well. And then the retailer is going to be impressed and be like, oh, well, actually, let's put in 20 stores and slowly build that up instead of just throwing it at the retail and just hope it sticks. Because we've made mistakes like that, but that's definitely where we learn from. Like, that's not the way how long-lasting it's going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I could sit here and ask you questions forever in terms of understanding the business, because every layer that I chip away at is just another layer of how complicated this is. But on that, talk to me about how, like, the starting journey. How did you end up building a business like you have now? Where did this start from?
So I'm Belgian. I arrived here in 2010 to study for 6 months, purely because actually I was in a different field. I was studying law at the time. I was set up to be an attorney. I came here because I wanted to surf mostly. So that's actually the real reason why I ended up here. Then moved back to Europe. Didn't enjoy Europe as much, working in a law firm. I did that for a year in Paris. And then I was like, okay, I need to be back in South Africa. So I came back here, and then I set up a logistics firm or an office for a European logistics business. That's where I met my co-founder at the time. He was an American. He met his wife in Aspen. She had a gap year there. She decided you have to move to South Africa if you want this to last. So we actually met roughly at like a similar time where we figure out, like, we want to be in South Africa. Well, we kind of have to be in South Africa for his parts. But we've studied 6-7 years. I studied bachelor's, master's, and another master after master. So I did a lot of studies. Like, I needed some return on investment. I couldn't be doing just anything in South Africa that I wanted. Like, I needed something solid. That's when Justin, my business partner, he joined the business. He joined the logistics firm. And we actually just got to know, I mean, I was a lawyer, he studied business. We didn't know anything about logistics, but it really allowed us to understand full supply chain. How do you import? What are the challenges? What are all the problems with it? We did that for a year together, and that's actually when we decided to start our own business. It's a very random story, but we were in a bar with a friend of mine who just came from Hong Kong. He actually, this is now pre-GoPro time and these kind of things. We were in a bar. He pulled out a selfie stick, attached his phone. It had a shutter remote button. And we were taking like selfies with the remote. And people in the bar were shocked. No one could actually believe it. Like, oh, wow, look at the angle. You're pressing a button and your camera is, your phone is taking a picture. And that's when I was like, that looks fun. Like, I'm sure we can make some money on it. Imported 1,000. I mean, we started literally, I think we each put 10,000 rands into the business. Didn't even set up a P2I, just imported some products. We knew how to import. We sold, I think, 45,000 units in less as 5 months. Very naively, we basically hustled. We looked at the product. We were like, Justin, what would you pay for this thing? I think $299, maybe actually $349. Let's make it $349. They didn't understand landed costing, didn't understand price calculations. We just looked at the product and like, I think someone would pay $349 for it. We built a brand around it. A horrible name, Selfie Stick Shop. So a lot of S's in it, misspelled a million times. And actually, we were obviously the very first in the market. Typical to what happens to a product category like that. Like at one point, it's going to get commoditized. Everyone sees the trend. Everyone brings in selfie sticks. The good thing is we were the first to market. We had that first movers advantage where people recognized the brand and we were considered the real selfie sticks. The rest were the copycats. So it allowed us actually to really continue that brand for quite a while. We started putting it in moms and pops. So like small retailers in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, with a store, 2 stores, 3 stores. They're actually great retailers because they're grassroots. They're so close to the customer that they actually really understand the needs of the customer and they're really good at selling it. And after selling 45,000 units or more even, the retailer came to us, or the small retailer came to us and was like, what's next? Like, this made us great money. Like, will you bring us the next innovation, please? And that's kind of how we rolled into the business. So zero intent of wanting to start an import business or a distribution business. I think at the time we considered ourselves more as like, we're a brand. We're going to build a brand. But obviously the self stick shop wasn't going to last us forever. You can't build that into a brand. You can't ride that way for 10 years. And that's kind of like slowly when we actually were like, okay, what's next? I think a breakthrough was pop sockets. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's basically like a cell phone accessory that you put on the back of your cell phone to hold your cell phone. At the time, we were dealing with the founder. 3 years or 4 years later, the company was doing $400 million and ready to IPO. The Kardashians, all kind of celebrities were endorsing it. So we actually really rode on that wave. And that product got us into the music guys at the time, Sportsman's Warehouse, like it was an impulse buy. And that actually launched us into like more mainstream, bigger retail chain. And that's already 3 years into the journey. But I think still then, in only up until 3-4 years ago, we actually really only realized like this is exactly what we want to be. Which is, I don't regret it. It was an organic process, but I think we could have gotten quicker to where we are now if we would have known straight from the beginning, this is exactly what we're going to do. It took us quite a while to actually realize this is our business. This is our core business model. Funny example, but it's so random, but I was actually in Builder's Warehouse, or I was somewhere yesterday, and the shelf had all these gnomes that you put into your garden. And I actually took a picture and sent it to my old business partner, because we, at one point, we were even looking, someone offered us a business with gnomes. It was up for sale, and you could build these characters and you build these like cities in your house and whatever. And we were like, even nearly interested in it. It's like, oh, maybe we should look at it. Maybe it's something. So just to show you of like the kind of like identity crisis you have, is like, okay, this self six was great, but what's next? Like, what's this?
Gnomes.
What's this business actually?
So I love that, but I think also, sure, I always like to think in principles, because the golden thread that I'm seeing throughout this is that how can you almost be in a certain goal still first to market again on an innovative product, right? And how is it that you can be the first proper distributor into South Africa for this unique product that's going to really drive demand in a category? And like exactly what happened with the selfie stick, for example. I think, why are you sticking to things that are innovative? But yes, you need to be fast. You need to know the market. You need to know what's going on there. So yeah, I think, talk to me over the past couple of years. You mentioned there that it took you so long to figure out your identity. I think for me, it's easy to explain that because you trained as a lawyer and an attorney, and now you're sitting in this space where just unpacking your business for a while, how complex this is, and how multifaceted the industry is. Just like looking at supply chains, and like in every single kind of product category you can think of, it's going to look different. So So knowing what the identity of the business is and like how would you describe what type of company you are, I think makes sense that it took that that amount of time, because I mean you started off as like selfie sticks and now you're consumer electronics and home goods. But talk to me about that realization, right? What was this point where you deviated away from an identity to come back to realize actually this is who we are and this is the kind of business that we're going to keep growing and scaling?
I think because now that I actually say all of this, like it actually comes even more as a realization to me, like it's actually something that I'm probably proud of in how we pivoted from the selfie sticks into a long-lasting business, because it really was a lot of soul searching. Yeah, like there's many ways you can go. Like for example, you could go into the area of like, we're gonna just build a brand. We're gonna choose a nice product. We're gonna build a brand around, and that's what we do. You could say we are wholesale and we're gonna do a D2C model. We are a value added. There's so many different routes we could have gone. So you really have to kind of identify what are all the options I've got in front of me and what is the most long-lasting one. So that was definitely a lot of soul searching. We made a lot of mistakes financially and just time-wise. Like we started another business where we were distributing FMCG. We started a brand called Go Water, which was caffeinated water. Amazing product still. Like it didn't have any sugar in it. It had caffeine. They took out the bitterness of the caffeine. So it tastes like water, but it's the same amount of caffeine with a cup of coffee. We put it into retailers. We never lost money on it, but we definitely lost like a year or 2 years on it. But we were just like, we got to find this next thing. Like we were still focused more on like brands and products and less on like, what's the bigger picture of the business that we want to be. So we definitely lost time. I mean, I think every mistake or learning mistake you make, it's not really a mistake, but it's at least there's a learning out of it. And afterwards you do know like, that's something we should never do. FMCG, I take my hat off for everyone who is in FMCG. You make 2 Rand, 3 Rand profit on a unit. You got to sell such a high volume in order to be profitable. So it made me more grateful, I think, of what's the core of our business and what are we good at. And I think the other part, definitely kind of like a pivotal moment for us, I think it was COVID too. In COVID, we pivoted quite a bit into PPR, like face masks, thermometers, all these kind of things, because we just wanted to continue the business. We knew how to import. We knew how to sell a product and sell it to retailers. At the time, nearly a whole business was cut off because it wasn't deemed essential. None of our products were deemed essential. So it was kind of the only way to actually continue business as is, because we had so much stock sitting in a warehouse. Like we had to generate turnover. So we started importing masks and all these kind of things. And we had some wins and we had some major losses. Shipments that got stuck, lost money, we had so many learnings of it. And we obviously suddenly were dealing with hospitals and dealing with all kind of medical providers. And actually doing all of that, I suddenly realized actually the core business that we've got with electronics, and at the time we didn't have a homeware division, we've got an amazing business. It's not like a commodity where it's going up and down and it's like basically trading on stock. Like we really have good brands. We've got solid products. It doesn't have that seasonality in it. We actually have an amazing business. And I think going through the pain of COVID really made me realize we've got something good. We should not be diluted anymore and maybe we should do this or this or this. Let's just focus on what we've got. Let's be grateful of the business model we actually have, and let's do this well and execute it the right way.
Sure. So Jan, I think all founders really relate to this concept of identity that's really fluid as you are as a business. And it's kind of this difficult tug of war, because how is it that you constantly adapt? How is it that you deal with the ideas and opportunities that you have, and how do you survive at certain points, exactly in terms of COVID? And then competing with that is what kind of business do you want to be? What do you want to build? How are you going to grow, scale? What's your vision for this? What's your vision for yourself? There's just a lot of push and pull around this. That at the end of the day, figuring out the business that you have is can be quite a journey. And the funny thing is, a lot of businesses like your own, once that's really clarified, goes through a bit of a rebranding exercise. So talk to me about how that happened, because since the COVID experience, realizing what identity actually is, not long after that, you shifted the brand to Supernova Brands. Talk to me about that process and how you got into that.
Correct. Yeah. No. When we started the business, all the focus was basically on this. Now 10 years ago, all the focus was on self-stick shop. So when we registered the PTY, we couldn't care less on what it was called. I think we put in a couple of names, J&J, Jan and Justin, but Justin and Jan, CPIC said rewards is available. Turned out to be J&J Rewards. So, and the retailers eventually, they knew us as J&J. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, because it was very confusing with Johnson & Johnson. We even got shampoo sent back to us. It opened doors sometimes, thinking that we were Johnson & Johnson. Anyways, the focus was on the products we sold, and we didn't want people to really, we couldn't care who J&J Rewards is. After COVID, we actually were like, no, if we actually do this right, similar to what I said with the lemon, okay, the retailer knows us. They actually don't really care that we change the rewards. They couldn't care less. But from the other side, from the brand side, every time we go to an international brand and we say we change the rewards, they're like, well, are you a rewards program? Do you want to sell a product on the rewards program? Super confusing. That's actually where we were like, okay, we need a proper rebrand. And that's why we rebrand to Supernova Brands. Long story, it's our products out of this world. It's a supernova. It's when the lights happens when you found that one special product. There's a long story to it. But it kind of coincided with my business partner, the Justin, the American guy, who basically was ready to go back to the States. That was straight after COVID. He asked me, well, we had a coffee together, and he said, I'm done. I think I'm going back to the States. Very emotional coffee we had there. And it kind of coincided. So we figured a rebrand is due. Justin, we were 50% shareholders. He's out. We put up his shareholding for sale. And eventually a private equity called C-Squared Capital, they bought over his shareholding, and it kind of coincided together that we were like, well, actually, while we at it, let's fully rebrand to Supernova Brands, and this is the new identity of the business, and that's roughly where we are now, actually.
Okay, so you just also dropped an absolute bomb there of your co-founder leaving the business and bringing a private equity firm involved, and we spoke about the rebrand. Okay, that's plenty. I want to get into that. I just want to speak to again. I mean, the how part of rebranding is, you go to a good branding agency, you kind of conceptualize this, you put the story together, and then build that into a brand. I mean, that part that I get. What I want to know is what did that solve for you, and why? You mentioned why it was necessary to change, that the suppliers didn't understand you, and what it is that you brought to the table. What would you say the results are of rebranding?
Tremendous, actually. And particularly because, again, in South Africa, no one is going to, except if you're a retailer, no one is going to know who or what Supernova Brands is. I still don't really mind in South Africa. I want people to know Dreamy, if I need a new hair appliance or hair dryer, I'm going to buy myself a Dreamy. That's the ultimate I care about. But overseas, the kind of global distribution world, it's a very small world, actually. There's not that many A+ brands around, and per country there's a couple of distributors that are well known, and it just, the ring to it and the whole story of Supernova Brands, it just has so much more to it, that a brand, it's we really had to put ourselves on the map as Supernova Brands on the international distribution market. And it's so much easier to do it with a brand that fits your identity and personality, instead of a J&J Rewards thinking that you're a rewards company. And it really did a lot to us, to be honest. It made a major change in explaining this story.
Yeah, and I like that also because of the timing was there, is that you also had enough proof in the market in terms of what you've been able to do, that now the brand makes a lot of sense. So when people are finding out about Supernova Brands for the first time, they almost look, it's like, how did I not know about this sooner? Like, look at what you've been able to do and achieve. Look at all these other brands that you've got on here. Look at the retailers. Like, yeah, 100%. I will definitely reply to your email and set up a meeting.
No, exactly. It's exactly that. It really is. And it already, if you can save the introduction, you can save the story on why you change your award. So you can just jump straight into it and they understand Supernova Brands. These are the 6 S's and that's what they do. The conversation with the brand is a lot easier.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Okay, so let's separate the conversation in terms of you and your co-founder parting ways. Like you said, it sounded very emotional. Before we get into the private equity side of things, why did he exit? Why did you stay?
Um, he was 7 years in. I think COVID definitely took it out of us, and that was an intense time. Those 2 years of totally different trading, different products. We worked so many weekends and nights, and I mean, COVID was one chaos basically. Um, and he also just wanted to be back in the States. He really, together with his wife and his kids, he really wanted to spend a lot more time back in the States. So he went on a holiday after the Christmas holidays, and he went there. And then actually, when he came back, he's like, "That's what I want to do." So we had many chats about it, but like I think it's great. Like you have to be honest with each other. Like I'd rather do it that way. I spend more time with him than anyone else in those 7 years. So you got to be brutally honest with each other when you're tired and exhausted and you actually want something new challenge. Why did I stay? Because I truly believe, particularly after COVID, in where we can be and where we can go. Like I wake up every morning and I'm convinced of it that we can do a lot better as what we're doing right now. And the message and the purpose we've got, I'm dead clear on it. So I decided definitely to stay on. And then we actually handled, I mean, at the time it was obviously like stressful and it was a lot of things happening, but he had a very open mindset to it and fair. He basically told me to, like, I want to sell. I want to get my money for my shares, but to who you sell, that's up to you. Like, you are the one that is going to need to be working with your equal business partner here. So you just make sure you get together with me the offers on the table, and then eventually we'll see where all the offers are ranging, and then you choose the one that you actually think that's the right partner to work with, and then we'll obviously try to get the offer as high as possible versus the other offers that were already on the table. So it was a fair, good process. It's not that he put the kind of like a knife on my throat. It's like, I'm going to sell to the highest bidder and that's it. So we handled it in a very nice and civilized way, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the greatest part about that from a transit, it's like, it's very different if you're both like, okay, we're both going to exit, right? I think that's because then it's who's the highest bidder, and then but then obviously to a certain point where it's like, okay, who's also going to take care of what we've built? Because I mean, there's also this emotional investment that you've had, but the main point there is like, how do we get the biggest return for this exit? Versus now, it's like, actually, who's the best person to replace you? From that, why? It's what I'm also very curious about is like from an entrepreneur's perspective, right? You're working with another entrepreneur, running off intuition, knowing that you can really align and get to know one another is, I think that, yeah, why private equity? Why also did you not buy him out and just take over the full stake of the business? Like there's I think in this situation, there's so many different paths that you could have gone down. Why did you end up exiting his shares to a private equity firm, and why C squared?
I had many sleepless nights about it. I think the journey of running a business and owning a business or entrepreneurship is lonely. It's an extremely lonely journey. It's a struggle to even with your partner, you can have discussions, but even your parents or your family or your close friends around you, like it's maybe I don't think I'm alone even with it, but I think it's rare that you can have an in-depth, real it's similar. It always reminds me of back in the days where you did your exams at university. You know, like you did your exam and you're like, oh man, that was bad. Like that was horrible. And then someone else tells you, oh, I'm sure you did well. I'm sure you're gonna pass. Like it actually always bothered me. It was like, you didn't write this exam with me. I'm telling you, I didn't do well. Because they're not there in that journey with you. They don't know how you studied. It's exactly the same with the business. You only yourself, when you're deep in a business, you understand the intricacies of it. You understand all the risk factors and everything that comes with it. So it's very rare that someone can actually perfectly tell you, like, do this or don't do this. And that's one of the main reasons why I decided to not buy the shareholding. I mean, obviously, financially, it would have been another financial risk that you take on yourself. So that's at part one. But mostly, I wanted to do this I wanted to strengthen ourselves and not weaken ourselves. If it was just me making double of the amount of money with the shareholding, I'd rather have our team strengthened with knowledge and know-how to get faster to the goal where we want to be. So that's why we chose that kind of route. And then we kind of had a couple of options. We had private investors, we had competitors, and we had more like the funds kind of scenario. If you sell to a competitor, can be good and bad, but obviously, like, you're now part of a bigger group, and the direction and the identity you have, you're probably going to lose a bit of it. But they can enhance your growth tremendously too, because they already have more learnings some businesses were around for 100 years already. So they definitely have a lot more learnings. But I wanted to stay true to the identity and run the journey by myself. Privates, definitely fully open to it. And we definitely had a lot of conversations there. And then I think why I chose more the fund route was, it's the people behind it. It's kind of the risk appetite to it. Like, you know, like it's risk capital, like you are making a risky investment into it. So it's someone or a business that is a bit more prone to, let's say, risk and growing and doing this together with you. And also it's the guys now that join us, they've been around, they've done a lot of acquisitions, they've done a lot of M&A, they've been in this industry, they've made good and bad decisions, and those learnings I saw that as an opportunity of, like, let's bring that into the business, so that we don't at least have to pay the price for a couple of mistakes that I would have made by myself. And that's ultimately how I ended up in this decision.
So I want to unpack that in a bit more depth, because the kind of capabilities that you'll get from a learnings of a private equity firm versus venture capital versus private investors, who's on your board, what kind of skills that they bring. I think what kind of stood out to you is, like, what practically, but it's like, because I mean, you mentioned these high level learnings around M&A and business, which is like, and like being an expert in business, it doesn't really necessarily make sense, because business is like a whole family of kind of expert categories. So can you be just a bit more specific in terms of, like, what did you think that they were going to really, how are they going to lift up Supernova Brands, and I guess help you achieve your vision? And what have they done so far? I mean, I say this like this decision happened yesterday. I mean, it was a couple of years ago. So maybe just talk to me through the journey of how it actually played out.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not a easy journey in the beginning. Like, I got to start off with, like, whatever partner you choose, it's probably one of the most crucial, or maybe the most crucial decision that you're going to make. You're going to work with these people day and night. You got to date properly before you actually dive into this marriage. So that's part one. Like, it is probably the most important decision that I made besides starting the business. As simple as that. What I particularly was looking for is, I'm I'm not a dreamer, but like I have a bit of a vision and where I want to be. But I think, guys, there's two main founders to the business. The one is the more entrepreneurial type. Well, not entrepreneurial, but like he's had a lot of businesses, sold a lot of businesses. The other founder of C Squared is CA, very account driven. And it's actually to bring in that knowledge that I mean, I've worked in a law firm for 6 months. I've worked in a logistics business for a year, and now suddenly I'm all doing it by myself in my own business. So I'm not experienced in that kind of way. Like I haven't been in a lot of businesses. I haven't done consultancy. I've not seen a lot. I just know kind of in our business, this works and this doesn't work. But there's probably so much implexes that you need outside. And that's really the knowledge that I wanted to bring in. When someone has done 50 M&A transactions already, they really can tell you one or two things of like, I can already tell you that and that is going to work and that is not going to work. So that's definitely part one. And part two, from a finance capital point of view, it's like with future M&A transactions in mind, you kind of want someone with that kind of knowledge and mindset to be open-minded. And like at one point you are gonna, and I'm not saying M&A is the only way to grow by no means, but and often there's more failure with M&A as the opposite way around. But you kind of do want that in your back pocket, as in like when we come across a good business and we can potentially do an acquisition, they are probably the right guys to actually help us with that kind of experience. And we, for example, this year we did an asset deal with a different company. His knowledge and his experience there was invaluable for me to actually go through that transaction. Would I have done that transaction by myself? I probably don't think so. So, and that's really the knowledge that are required. They let me run the business day to day. So they don't really get involved in the very much day to day, but I've got an amazing soundboard on a daily, weekly, weekendly level to actually work with them and soundboard a lot of things. Because again, it's a lonely journey. There's going to be a lot of problems coming along your way. There's a lot of moving factors in a business. You actually want to, even if you can chat through it on a late call for half an hour, sometimes by just chatting through it in someone that as equally invested as you can already have such a better and clear understanding of what is actually at stake or what's the problem.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it, where because also again, all private equity and all VC, all private investors are very different, and then a lot of them aren't going to bring what you want to the table in terms of, do I actually feel like this is a partnership? Like you've got half the equity of the business. Are you going to act like it? And I think part of that is making that call. So, sure, talk me through the process, because it's a very big decision to go with them. How did you go out of all the potential buyers? How did you go and actually evaluate that C Squared was the one that you thought was best?
Yeah, I mean, it's an extremely good question, because in hindsight, I probably didn't do it the full correct scientific way myself. I probably relied on pure gut feeling, which quite often entrepreneurs just in general do, and you go by your guts. But in hindsight, it's scary to actually take that decision on gut feeling. So how we went about it, when we made a clear decision that Justin was about or willing to sell his shareholding, I went around. I approached a lot of people. Eventually, we actually got a company, an M&A company advising us. They were called Intaba Capital. They actually helped us on the journey. From their experience, they tell you what to look out for, what the pitfalls are. And actually, the introduction eventually to the company C Squared that we went with was actually an introduction via Intaba Capital. So that was also quite nice that she could vouch for them.
They sound like a value-added distributor, but for businesses.
No, literally. I mean, she did an amazing, because like there's so much to unpack. But basically, if you're an M&A advisor, ultimately what the M&A advisor is chasing is their fee on the sale. And you could actually reason for yourself, like it's similar to a real estate agent. Sometimes, and I'm not saying I'm not making it very broad, but you could sometimes reason like they couldn't care less whether or not you're going to be happy in that house as long as they make the sale. And it's very likewise with M&A. Like you're basically selling some real estate here or real estate here, and they ultimately they want to make that sale so that they make their fee on it. So you're really going to make sure that whoever is advising you in that process, you have a full trust in that person that they're going to be doing the right thing for you. I definitely had that with them. They were not chasing the highest number. They were just giving honest and truth feedback on that may be the best offer, but it's probably not the best offer for you. And they laid it out for my old business partner, Justin, and myself. And they were like, these are the pros, these are the cons. That's something that you're going to take in mind. So helped us a lot to have that person on board. But when I say scientific and it's like dating, like you meet people over and over. I think at least we had 10, 15 meetings with quite a lot of companies. And you obviously at one point, you also go in a due diligence process. I think at one time you had about 3 to 6 DDs running at the same time on our business. So it's extremely time consuming for yourself, extremely time consuming. Like it doesn't allow you to focus on the day-to-day business, to be honest. But in that DD process, you also kind of start to understand of like, you're now properly dating. Like you're not just meeting up anymore, you're properly dating. You're actually in that DD process, you're working together with each other. You see the kind of questions they're asking back and forth to you. And you kind of see the grit that company has and like how do they work? What's the way of approaching things? How straightforward are you? And I think it probably was one of the main reasons why I ended up choosing C Squared Capital, because the guy that I work the most with of the founders is called Christo. He's a bulldog. Like if he's got a bone, he's gonna get it and he's gonna chase that. And that's kind of the mentality that I picked up. The man works day and night. It's incredible. A machine. Like, and that's kind of what I was looking for. Like I want a machine with me on this journey, who's not gonna give up. And even when it gets difficult and challenging, like you're gonna come and help and find solutions. So that's ultimately why I made that decision too, that they were a really good partner for us to team up with. But in saying that, it could also have gone horribly wrong. Like right now, we a good 2 years in, it's working. I think we're going into 3 years. But we're actually going into 3 years now. So that's how fast it kind of goes. But I mean, I think if I look at it in hindsight, it could have gone horribly wrong.
Right.
I should have done a lot of different things. Like eventually in the meetings that you have, the introduction meetings and getting to know the business and the DD, you only do one part of the business. You're looking at financials, you're looking at understanding some core structures of the business. You're not looking at the day-to-day, like we had a strategy session where you lay out, like, that's how I see the future of the business. We did that, but you're not working day-to-day with each other. You're not fully understanding what's the full appetite, the risk appetite of that fund. Where do they want to go? Like, there's so many things that only along the way you figure out. Similarly with just dating in general, someone can talk a lot and say, wife, or future wife, I'm gonna do the dishes every night. Easy. It's so easy to say it, but when actually you're married, and it's so easy to also walk away from your duties. Like, actually, sorry, but I got soccer tonight. I'm not gonna do the dishes. It can happen with so many of these things, and that's really what I realized. Like the risky decision that I made, it could have turned out the total other way. And I think in hindsight, if I would have done this different, yes, the company who wants to acquire the shareholding needs to do a DD on you, but you should do an exact same DD on them. And I never had a sheet with proper questions or things I wanted to know about them, and even ownership, and like really going deep to actually figure out what drives you? What is your strategy? Like, I should have done exactly the same with them. I should have sent them a proper DD process and run that through on them. But I think at the time you are so consumed by this sales process that you actually think like, oh, I'm the one selling here. I'm selling a product. I'm selling something, and I must make sure that they eventually offer me the best price. But that's not the case. Like yes, it is the case, but that's not the determining factor. You should interview them as much as they're interviewing you on this process. And that's without a doubt something that I would have done totally different. And I'm lucky my gut feeling worked out well. But it definitely wasn't a scientific process that I went through myself. And even from the M&A, like again, exactly what I was saying, the M&A, and I'm not saying Intawe Capital did it, but they want to make that sale. If it's the best offer on the table and you do your due diligence, and you actually eventually, after you doing the due diligence on the acquirer, if you actually then realize like, actually that's not the right company for you, for a vision that it misaligns in 3 years, 5 years or whatever, you could have made a big mistake, but the M&A advisor, they just want to make the sale happen.
Yeah, I think to your point is the fact that even they're looking for the right buyer. You're looking for the right partner, right? And so although they can definitely do their job, and is like, on paper, this is like definitely the right buyer, regardless of the fee and the details, it's just like, it just is. But for you is like, but are these the right people? Because that's not just like, you're not getting them as a brand, you're not getting them as a company. The point is you're getting people on your leadership team and your board, and that's what you're replacing. You're replacing your co-founder. Or in this situation, it's like especially when you're getting a 50-50 equity, it's like we have equal say in terms of this business. So it's like the level of trust that I need on that is completely different if you're getting someone with a minority stake.
Yeah, exactly. No, 100%. And that's exactly it. But I also, because I mean, obviously the question was offer raised. Why didn't you buy 10% of the shares and you sold the balance of the 40%? But quite often, and I could be totally wrong with this, but quite often the companies who's going to acquire that 40%, they also have they start with a bit of distrust, as in like, why do you want that controlling power? Like, why do you want that 10% extra and we put the 40? So in the sales process, it sometimes can actually hamper your sale, or there's some sort of distrust in, is that the right thing to do? So also there, like, I don't know if I made the right choice, but for now it feels good, because you really feel like we are equally in this. With the risk we're taking and the stock investments and all the other things we do, you and I, to get in this journey as invested equally.
And I guess practically what they brought to the table besides that partnership, my assumption is that they've also brought obviously a war chest of capital that they can bring to a business that's very capital intensive and just allows you the basis to be able to scale. I mean, again, what happened afterwards is that you added a whole new division to the company after bringing them on board, right? So like the rebrand happened, you brought in a whole new division to the company. Like even there's like the goods that you're buying are way more expensive. So just immediately them coming on as partners really helps take your business to the next level.
Yeah, definitely. And I think year one was a lot of searching, finding each other like that. I'm not gonna. I mean, it wasn't hard or horrible, but it definitely, that year one was really kind of finding each other and like where you're gonna spend the time and where am I gonna spend the time, and that definitely took us a year to figure that out. But particularly with Crystal, like we turn out to be very complementary in ways, and that's obviously kind of what you're looking for when you find a new business partner. I didn't think it through in that much detail, to be honest, when we did the transaction, but he's got a totally different skill set as I have, and we actually turn out to be extremely complementary there. And again, I'm a lawyer. I have I think a decent, good financial understanding, and I can do an income statement and a balance sheet. But his financial understanding and structures is extremely good. So that's been extremely beneficial to the business in streamlining the process. And I mean, it's not part-time CFO, but it kind of actually, we've got a financial manager, but he actually has that part-time CFO role in our business. So he's definitely more, it's not like a private equity who, and that's really something that I needed. I didn't want a fund to come, ride that journey without actually getting involved in one board meeting a month. Like I wanted actually someone who's going to contribute to this. Like we're doing this together. You're going to contribute to the success of the business. And we definitely found where we complement each other. And actually, to be honest, like that's where we've seen the most gains in the business, where we kind of complement each other, and we've done things to do better for the business that both of us were the best at.
Sure. So I mean, just goes to show that the decision that you made has paid off and worked out. Not only did you, because again, I think this is the point. A lot of people, when they think I'm getting private equity on board, I'm not getting a proper leader within my business, and you got that too. Someone that you can really lean on and trust as well. And I think the proof is in the pudding in terms of what you've been able to achieve in coming into your third year now. So I guess, Jan, what does the future look like? What would you say the next 6 to 12 months, maybe even depending on how far you can see, I guess, given the fact that the foreseeable future is not that foreseeable. But tell me about like how the next year or longer looks for you. What are your plans?
Similar to what I said in the beginning, is what we do, we must do better. So that's definitely a focus. Like we've got amazing products and brands in our business. We now must make sure that instead of selling 1,000, I'm using a simple example but instead of selling 1,000 units of that product, how do we sell 10,000 units of that product? So not always particularly, I mean, obviously you're looking for newness and what's the next golden egg, and you're always on that chase. So without a doubt, there will be 1 or 2 or 3 brands added to the stable, but it's particularly on what we do now, how do we do that better? That's the short-term focus. Because building brands in South Africa takes time. There is no shortcuts. There is no fast way of doing it. If you want that trust and that loyalty of a South African consumer, I always say it takes you 2 to 3 years. So all the seeds that we're planting now and the campaigns and the marketing, whatever we're doing now, we'll only really see the success in year 2 and year 3. So that's kind of, we've planted a lot of seeds. We've got an amazing, really amazing stable of brands. Now it's actually just executing on it properly. That's kind of the short-term goal, where we want to be. Long-term wise, we want to be a very established distribution business in the South African market, but not only in the South African market. We're busy expanding in Southern Africa. So we've got an entity in Zambia, in Botswana, Namibia, Angola is coming up, in Mauritius. So we're definitely moving into the Southern African markets, and that's obviously a big part of the expansion for our business too.
Sounds like a really exciting time. It sounds that this I'm trying to figure out this pun in terms of a rocket ship going into space and creating another supernova there. It's good timing that the brand names changed, because it sounds like a really exciting time to be part of your business. Jan, thank you very much for being on the Founder Files. It's been an epic conversation. I guess the last question is just, what's the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
I think one of the questions is, or why you haven't asked me is like, what's the longevity of a business these days? And like the longevity of entrepreneurship that keeps you exciting. One of the things that I recently mentioned to someone, or actually a couple of questions that I got asked is, are you still excited? Because we just turned 10 years, and I must have posted somewhere about celebration with it. And someone wished me congrats. Actually, a couple of people, and that's what stood out to me. A couple of people wished me congrats, but quite a couple of reactions were, and I would have replied like, oh, with your business, I'm also wishing that in a couple of years you can celebrate your 10 years, like to kind of reciprocate the success and the wishes. And quite a couple of people, like I think 3 or 4, said, I hope I've sold my business long time by when I reach the 10 years anniversary. And it kind of even felt like it was looked down on. Like it's quite boring. You've got a business for 10 years. And I think that's a question that more and more I keep on getting. Like, is it still sexy to actually own a business that is 20 years old? Which is a very interesting topic for me. Like it looks like people are looking for newness, and it's not sexy when you run a business for 10 years or 20 years. Like, you got to move on multiple businesses. And that's the part that I always think is interesting. Like, to me, a business that's being run for 50 years, like that's beautiful to me. And I guess it depends on what perspective you look at it.
So I've got some very strong opinions about this. What's yours?
I think it's similar in our business to, like, instead of chasing always the what's next, like, let's just do what you've got now. Let's do that well. Let's do that extremely well executed, so that even if you become the biggest in South Africa, let's say you're the biggest value added distributor, it doesn't need to stop there. You can move into new countries. There's a lot of new territories. It really doesn't need to stop there. And instead of starting a new business over and over and over, like, it's beautiful to build a long-lasting business. Like, I sometimes drive around and I can look at a business, and my girlfriend asked, and I said, "Oh, that's a beautiful business." And she's like, "Well, you're looking at a warehouse," but it's like, no, like, there's 50 years of a business there, longevity that business owners built. I think that part is beautiful to it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and especially in this time where volatility is higher than ever, product life cycles are shorter than ever. It's so hard to do that. And we talk about, the irony is that a lot of founders who celebrate agility and moving fast, the ones that will be serial entrepreneurs, like start something and then sell it. I think the kind of agility that you need to be able to keep the same business in this era for decades or more, you need to learn, you need to develop, you need to be very open-minded and agile towards the market. And I think that's a very unique skill set. I also think that starting a business from scratch is probably one of the hardest things that you can do. And look, don't get me wrong, this is like, I have loads of respect for those people. If that's what you're into, 100% go for it. But the other side of it is, like, once you've grown it to a point of like stable profitability and sustainable growth, like, after that, it like, as long as you're doing things in a wise way, like, the hardest part's behind you, right? And everything up here is just like topside payoff. Like, this is just, that's where the win happens. That's how you can build, like, pretty generational wealth. I honestly think that again, this is why I said strong opinion. But the narrative that's been really pushed by VC is because if you look in the VC world, 5 to 10 years, like, that's when they're wanting to exit a business. And if it's taking 10 years for a business to exit, that's a relatively poor performing investment. So what that then looks at is, especially, I think a lot of the founders that have this mentality around exiting a business in a short amount of time is because they've navigated a lot of their thinking towards what VCs prioritize, but VCs are looking at this as an investment class, right? Entrepreneurs should be looking at this as building a business and something that's moving forward. And if you're going to look at it with that VC mentality, 100%, like, it's a shorter life cycle that you're looking at that. But then it's also like, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? And for me, there's my mentality is 15 to 20 years to build a really great business. And my exit strategy for MetaVolve is death. I say that jokingly. It's probably going to be succession, because it's something that I want to obviously continue past my lifetime. But yeah, I guess each their own. But I think it's if you can really persist and get it past the 10-year mark, it's only going to get more fun from there, in my opinion.
Yeah, but you often see it on LinkedIn in bios. Like, often success is measured on sold 3 or exited 3 businesses successfully. Like, that's often where it feels like, if you put that in obviously, I've got an amazing amount of respect that you sold 3 businesses, but that doesn't make you a better businessman or entrepreneur or whatever versus someone who's had the business for 50 years. It could be that person, besides financially, is actually a lot more successful in achieving something. And I think that's just a mindset that I've seen with particularly sometimes younger generation too, where if you didn't sell your business, you weren't successful.
That's and the reason why I disagree with that is because this is when I start looking at someone in terms of, how am I getting a payout and a paycheck for this business versus how am I shaping my identity as a leader? And how is it that I'm continuing to develop? How am I taking on more complexity, more responsibility, adding more value to more people, and like shifting my role towards, I guess maybe that's just what I care about. The name of the game for me is also fulfillment. So as the more that I go down this path, it's around the fact that it's like, how can I be a leader and really have this like cascading effect of developing and improving other people's lives whilst adding a huge amount of value to the market and industry, and actually seeing these ripple effects of change I'm creating. You can't do that without scale and time.
Without a doubt. I mean, for me, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, the financial part is obviously everyone wants a nice payday at one stage, but it really, if it's just for the money, you're not going to wake up with that grit every single morning. Unless you know your journey is 2-3 years, I think you can do that. And you're like, I just have to sit this out for 3 years and I get my payday. Maybe then I get it. But if you do this for the long term, you got to get your fulfillment out of so many other things. And I get it. Even just for me, bringing people like employees, staff members, bringing them together, bonding them, building their careers. Like, that's the real fulfillment you get out of a business. And if you get at the ceiling, you feel like you're at the ceiling, that's when the puzzle, I mean, someone always said like the sale begins is your actual sale begins when someone tells you no. Like, that's when you figure out the puzzle. Like, what's next? Like, there's nothing bigger. No, like there is bigger, but like become creative, do something about it. And to me, that's actually where the challenge really begins. Like, what's next for us? How do we grow? And I think that's probably the most exciting part for me, where I wake up with that grit every single morning and I get out of bed.
Yeah. I've got lots more opinions that could start making this super controversial, but I guess I'll park it there. Jan, thank you very much for the conversation. Would love to actually continue that conversation with you over meal, because I think we share similar opinions. It's been great to have you on the Founder Files. Thank you for sharing your wisdom here. And yeah, excited for the next couple of years and all the expansion plans you have.
Thanks a lot for the invite. I really, really do appreciate it.
As this conversation with Jan is highlighted, explaining your business, explaining your strategy, finding the right partner and investor for you, how is it that you're going to go forward, trying to expand into multiple countries, there's a huge amount of complexity. So for many people, they're fine with that. They love it being super complex. But for a lot of people, they really want to simplify this, especially if you're trying to get other people to understand your business when you're part of a due diligence process and you're in an M&A process. And this is something that MedEvolve specifically helps with. Like, something that we're exceptionally good at is simplifying complexity. How is it that we can take what your business is, the value you add to the market, your advantages and why people buy from you, the trends happening in your industry, and how exciting what you do is, into a couple-page document that pretty much any person can understand, and they don't require deep jargon to know so. This is something that we are exceptionally good at. So if this is something that you'd like my help with, and to figure out how is it that we can really take your beautiful complex business, simplify it down and explain it in a strategy that's super clear, that other people can understand, know how to support and execute, well, that's kind of what makes us unique at MedEvolve. So if you want to find out more about that and how we go down this process of unpacking what a business is and explain it simply, reach out to me. I'll have a conversation with you, show you how it works, and maybe we'll share some ideas and we'll learn from each other. But on the topic of learning, if you've enjoyed this podcast, you've learned a thing or two, and you think there's other people in your network that could learn from Jan or from the podcast in general, then please share this episode with them, or like and comment. It's the best way to support the podcast. It's the best way to make me feel happy as the podcast host. And I hope this podcast makes you happy too and allows you to learn as well. But ladies and gentlemen, that's it from me for this week. Thank you again for listening to another episode of the Founder Files, and I will see you next time. Cheers.